I was holding a silver tray at my own father-in-law's funeral when my husband smiled at me, like he'd already buried me too. That smile still haunts me, not because it was cruel, but because it was victorious. My name is Simone, and at 30 years old, I learned something brutal in a room full of lilies and fake condolences. Money doesn't change people, it unmasks them. The Winston estate in Atlanta looked like something ripped out of a luxury magazine. Marble floors so polished they reflected the chandeliers, jazz music floating through the air, guests dressed in black designer outfits whispering numbers instead of memories. This was supposed to be a funeral reception, but it felt more like a victory party. I wasn't standing with the family. I wasn't seated at the front. I was working, balancing a heavy silver tray of champagne flutes, weaving between guests who barely acknowledged my existence, like I was invisible help instead of the woman married into this family for 5 years. And the irony, I was the only one who had actually been there when Winston, my father-in-law, was dying. 6 months. 6 months of hospice care, medication schedules, midnight calls to nurses, and whispered conversations in dim hospital rooms, while everyone else couldn't emotionally handle it. I adjusted my plain black dress, the only funeral outfit I could afford after draining my savings to cover Winston's medical bills, and forced a polite smile as a guest brushed past me without looking. Simone, that voice sliced through the room. Mama Estelle, my mother-in-law, sat at the VIP table like royalty, draped in black velvet, diamond rings catching the light every time she moved her hand. She didn't wave me over. She summoned me. "Why is my son's glass empty?" she snapped. "And where is the vintage champagne? He doesn't drink budget bubbles." My feet ached in heels I'd owned since before I married into this family. I walked over, keeping my head down. "They're opening the bottles now," I said quietly. "It'll just be a moment." She looked me up and down like I was something stuck to her shoe. "Useless," she muttered. "Winston isn't even cold yet, and you're already failing this family. You're only here because my son was kind enough to keep you." The non-perpeche bumped her elbow into the tray. Ice water cascaded down the front of my dress, soaking my shoes. A few nearby guests gasped. Mama Estelle didn't even blink. "Clumsy," she said with a click of her tongue. "You embarrass us. Go clean yourself up before Jamal sees you like this." I swallowed hard, because if I opened my mouth, I would have told everyone the truth. That I was the one who paid the mortgage on this mansion when the family trust was temporarily elected. That I was the architect pulling double shifts while Jamal chased business ideas that went nowhere. That I was the one holding Winston's hand when his own son couldn't be bothered to visit. But I didn't say a word. I turned toward the kitchen, because Winston had asked me not to make a scene. And I loved him enough to honor that Tiva now. That's when the double oak doors slammed open. The room fell silent. Jamal walked in like he owned the world, not in the black suit we'd chosen together. No, he wore an electric blue custom designer suit that shimmered under the chandeliers. Funeral. He looked like he was headed to a red carpet premiere. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification from my credit card app. $5,000. Versace boutique approved 2 hours ago. My stomach dropped. He'd bought that suit with my card. The same card I used for groceries. The same card already maxed out from the funeral deposit. Jamal strutted to the center of the room, grabbed a microphone from the band leader, and smiled like a man who had just hit the lottery. "Thank you all for coming," he announced. "Today we mourn my father, but we also celebrate a new chapter." New chapter. That's when he said the number. $570 million. The room gasped. It was tacky. It was disrespectful. And Jamal loved every second of it. "My father was careful," he continued, adjusting his cuffs. "But now the Winston family is done living small." Applause, hesitant at first, then louder. "To wealth, to freedom." He raised his glass. "And to trim the fat." Something cold crawled up my spine, and his eyes found me. He crooked a finger. "Simone," he said into the microphone. "Come here." Every head turned. I walked toward him, my wet shoes quietly betraying me against the marble floor. For a split second, I let myself hope. Maybe he'd thank me. Maybe he'd acknowledge the sacrifices. Maybe, just maybe, this was grief talking. I reached him and whispered, "Jamal, please, this isn't the time." He didn't lower the mic. "You look awful," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Wets, messy, you don't fit this picture anymore. My heart stuttered. What are you doing? I asked. He smiled. I'm cleaning the house. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a folded document. Not a handkerchief, not notes, divorce papers. He tossed them onto the tray I was still holding. Sign them, he said. Right now. The room froze. You're useless to me now, Simone, Jamal continued calmly. Take your little salary and go. The real money stays with the Winstons. I looked down at the papers, then back at him. Are you sure? I asked quietly. You want to do this here? He leaned in, his breath heavy with expansive alcohol and arrogance. I want you gone. Something inside me snapped. I didn't cry it in beg. I pulled out my own cheap pen, signed my name, and handed him back the papers. Okay, I said evenly. But you forgot one thing. He laughed. What? That I'll miss your cooking? No, I said, finally, smiling. You forgot to read the will. His laugh followed me as I walked away. He thought he'd won. He had no idea the game had just started, because the will didn't just leave him money. It left him a trap and he just walked straight into it, where the humiliation turns violent and the real secret begins to surface. I thought the divorce papers were the worst part. His family decided to take everything that proved I ever mattered. I didn't make it 10 steps before Jamal called my name again. Not gently, not privately, Sloan. That tone, sharp, commanding, the kind you use on staff. Not your wife. I stopped, still holding the silver tray like some twisted symbol of how low I'd fallen. The guests parted as I turned back toward him, their eyes wide with the kind of curiosity people pretend is an excitement. Jamal stared at me like I was a stain he couldn't wait to scrub out. You're really wearing that? He sneered. You look like hired help. A few people laughed. Quietly, nervously, I swallowed. Jamal, enough. He shook his head. No, I'm done pretending. The old man is gone. I don't need to fake loyalty anymore. Then he did something deliberate. He reached into his jacket again, and this time threw another copy of the divorce papers right onto the tray. They landed in the middle of shrimp toast and melted ice, grease soaked into the paper. Sign it again, he said loudly. I want witnesses. A ripple of gasps moved through the room. $570 million, Jamal continued, pacing like a motivational speaker. That's legacy money. And you, he pointed at me, you were a placeholder. That word hit harder than the papers. Placeholder. You were useful when I was waiting, he went on. Now my time's here. I felt like I was shrinking in front of everyone until Mama Estelle appeared. She moved fast for a woman who claimed arthritis every time. She didn't want to lift a finger. She didn't look at Jamal. She didn't look at the papers. Her eyes locked onto my neck. The pearl necklace. Winston's pearls. You don't get to keep that, she hissed, before I could react. Her hand shot out. Her nails dug into my skin as she yanked. The clasp snapped. The sound echoed through the ballroom. Pearls scattered across the marble. Floor like teeth. Clack, roll, bounds. Time slowed. Those pearls weren't expensive by Winston standards, but they were priceless to me. He'd given them to me on my 30th birthday. Your family, he'd said, and family protects what matters. Mama Estelle kicked one of the pearls with the tip of her shoe. That belongs to the Winston family, she spat. Not a gold digger. I grabbed my neck, feeling heat and pain where the string had snapped. I paid for his nurses, I whispered. I paid for you paid, she laughed. With our name attached, please. She turned to the guests, voice rising. Look at her. Parading around in heirlooms while my husband was dying. The lie was so smooth it almost impressed me. Then Courtney stepped in. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect cruelty. She crouched, picked up a pearl, examined it like trash, and flicked it across the room with her heel. Honestly, Simone, she said sweetly, this is for the best. She leaned in close, whispering loud enough for others to hear. Jamal is a billionaire now. Kings don't marry the help. I felt something inside my chest quake and harden at the same time. You were good for paying bills, Courtney continued, for changing bedpans, for struggling. She smiled. But this world, you don't belong in it. She patted my cheek. Then she turned away. That's when I knelt, slowly, deliberately. I ignored the stares, the whispers, the humiliation burning my skin. I picked up the divorce papers from the tray, brushed off the crumbs of, walked to the front of the room, and placed them beside Winston's portrait. I signed again. My name is Bold Steady. When I turned around, Jamal was watching me like something wasn't sitting right. I handed him the papers. It's done, I said calmly. You're free. He snatched them. Finally, I didn't move. Just one question, I said. He rolled his eyes. What now? Did you actually read the will? He laughed. Loud? Confidence? My uncle handled it. I get everything. I nodded. Then congratulations. And walked out. But the punishment wasn't over. Not even close. When I reached the penthouse that night, the home I paid for, the keypad flashed red. Access denied. I tried again. Red. My phone buzzed. User access revoked. Then a voice message. Jamal's voice. Drunk on power. Don't bother coming back. I changed the codes. This place is for winners. The rain started pouring as I stepped back onto the street. Cold, heavy, relentless. I stood there soaking, staring up at the lights of the home that used to be mine. That's when I heard it. An engine. Low, expensive. A Miklar. It pulled up, splashing water onto my legs. The door opened. Jamal stepped out under a black umbrella. Then she appeared. Dominique. Instagram perfect. White dress. 6-inch heels. He covered her with an umbrella. Left me in the rain. Is that her? Dominique laughed. She looks tragic. She placed a hand on her stomach. We should go, she said loudly. Stress isn't good for the baby. The baby. My world tilted. They walked past me like I didn't exist. Jamal didn't even look back. I stood there shaking, not from the cold anymore, from fury, because in that moment, stripped of my home, my marriage, my reputation, I realized something dangerous. They thought they'd broken me. They had no idea they'd just created their worst enemy. Because while Jamal was celebrating his future, a man Winston trusted was about to call me on to tell me everything he'd planned from the grave. The call that changes the entire power balance. I was sitting on a park bench with $20 left to my name when my phone rang and the dead finally spoke. I didn't go back to the penthouse. I couldn't. The rain had soaked me through. My heels were useless, and the city felt louder than ever. Like it was reminding me how small I'd become overnight. I walked until my legs burned, past blowing restaurants, past couples laughing under umbrellas, past a life that no longer included me. I finally collapsed onto a bench in Washington Park, clutching my purse like it was the last proof I still existed. Inside was my wallet, my ID, my credit card, a business card with my name printed in gold, senior architect, a title I no longer had. I tore the card in half, then into quarters, then let the pieces scatter into the grass. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment you stop fighting and accept the quiet humiliation of starting over. I pulled out my phone. No service, of course. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over Uncle Vernon's contact. Jamal's uncle, the lawyer who'd iced me out that morning at the bank. One call, one surrender. I was seconds away from pressing it when the phone beavered. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. Hello, I whispered. Is this Simone Winston? The voice was older, calm, controlled. Yes, this is Arthur Henderson. The name hit me wrong. I don't understand, I said. Uncle Vernon handles the estate. Arthur let out a quiet laugh. Vernon handles what the family wants seen. I handle what Winston wanted. Protected. My heart skipped. Protected. Why are you calling me now? I asked. Because Winston told me to wait until you lost everything. The words landed like a punch. He knew, Arthur continued. He knew Jamal would betray you. He knew Estelle would turn. He knew they'd try to destroy you. My throat tightened. He said, don't call her unless they strip her bare. Tears burned, but they weren't the same kind. These weren't helpless tears. These were vindicated ones. I need you to meet me, Arthur said. Alone, 1 hour, Rusty Spoon Diner on 4th. The Rusty Spoon. I repeated, exactly. Bring nothing but your courage. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, pulse racing. An hour later, I walked into the greasiest diner I'd ever seen. There he was. Arthur Henderson didn't look like a powerful attorney. No flashy suit. No Rolex. just sharp eyes and an old coat that looked like it had seen wars. "You look like hell," he said. "I feel worse," I replied. He slid a black envelope across the table. "Winston called your family vultures," he said quietly, "but you were the only one he trusted." My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal. Inside were legal documents, precise, terrifying. "The Winston Asset Protection Trust." Arthur pointed to a highlighted section. "Clause 7B, I read aloud. "In the event Jamal Winston dissolves his marriage to Simone Winston, all controlling interests shall transfer to the trustee." I looked up. "Who's the trustee?" Arthur didn't blink. "You?" The diner seemed to tilt. "Jamal didn't inherit power," Arthur continued. "He inherited a leash. And he just yanked it." I flipped the page. "Assets, properties, voting shares, all rerouted. All waiting. But there's a condition," Arthur said. "You have to let the divorce finalize. Let him think he won." I thought of the pearls, the rain, the baby. "I can do that," I said. Arthur slid me a pen. "Then get ready," he said. "Puff, because when this triggers, he won't just lose money. He'll lose everything." Because while Jamal was busy spending millions he didn't own, the clock was ticking toward the moment I took it all back, where the trap tightens and Jamal starts digging his own grave. The hardest part wasn't losing everything, it was smiling while he burned it down for me. I didn't go public, I didn't call friends, I didn't post cryptic quotes or cry on anyone's shoulder. I disappeared. That's exactly what Winston wanted. For 3 weeks, I became a ghost in my own life. I moved into a short-term rental on the edge of the city, small, clean, forgettable, the kind of place no one with real money would ever look for me. I paid cash, changed my number, logged out of everything tied to the Winston name, and I watched. Arthur sent updates daily. Not advice, not opinions, just facts. And every fact made one thing clear: Jamal was spiraling. The money hit his account fast, but not all of it. Just enough to make him feel invincible. Enough to fuel bad decisions, very bad ones. Day 3. He leased a beachfront property in Miami under an LLC he didn't realize he didn't fully control. Day 5. He wired 7 figures into a sure-thing crypto venture pushed by one of his new billionaire friends. Day 8. He hosted a champagne-soaked party at the penthouse, the same one I'd been locked out of, broadcasting it all on social media. I watched the videos in silence. Dominique draped across him, Courtney posing in couture. Mama Estelle smiled like she'd personally invented wealth. Jamal looked free. To free, Arthur called that night. "He's using assets tied to the trust," he said calmly, "which means every signature, every deal, every loan requires trustee approval. And he doesn't have it," I said. "No," Arthur replied. "He has confidence. That's worth." I smiled for the first time in weeks. But then came the message. A letter, delivered by courier, handwritten, from Jamal. "Simone, I heard you're struggling. I'm not surprised. Don't worry, I won't humiliate you publicly. I'm generous like that. Sign the final settlement quietly and I'll wire you $250,000. It's more than you deserve." I read it twice. Then I laughed out loud. He still thought he was in control. Arthur advised silence. Winston had been clear: no confrontation until the trigger event finalized, so I waited. Meanwhile, Jamal escalated. He filed motions. He froze accounts he thought were his. He threatened my former employer with lawsuits if they hired me back. That one stung. Not because I needed the job, but because it showed how far he was willing to go just to feel tall. Then inevitably he made the mistake Winston predicted. He proposed publicly on a yacht. Dominique said yes with tears, diamonds, and a perfectly timed drone shot. The headline went viral: "Billionaire heir moves on fast after divorce." Arthur called me immediately. He filed for a prenuptial agreement. He said he's rushing the marriage. "Why?" I asked. "Because he's bleeding money," Arthur replied, "and he doesn't know why." I leaned back against the window, watching traffic crawl below. "Is it time?" I asked. "Almost," Arthur said. "But first, you need to do one thing." "What?" "Let him see you." 2 days later I walked into the Winston family charity gala, uninvited, not dressed to impress, not dressed to disappear. I wore a simple black dress. Clean lines, no logos. Confidence doesn't need branding. The room froze when I entered. Mama Estelle's smile cracked. First, Courtney whispered something sharp. Dominique stiffened, her hand instinctively moving to her ring. And Jamal stared like he'd seen a ghost who refused to stay buried. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, pulling me aside. "I got an invitation," I said lightly. "Didn't you?" His jaw tightened. "You don't belong here anymore?" "Funny," I replied. "You said the same thing about marriage," he scoffed. "You're broke, Simone. This is pathetic." I leaned in. "So is spending money you don't actually control." His face flickered, just for half a second. "Fear," I straightened. "Enjoy the night, Jamal. You look stressed." I walked away before he could respond. Arthur texted me 5 minutes later. Trippa confirmed. The divorce finalized. The trap was armed. All that was left was to pull it. Because the next morning, Jamal would wake up a billionaire and go to bed as something much worse. Where the money freezes on, the panic finally hits. Jamal woke up rich that morning. By lunchtime, every dollar he touched turned to smoke. The divorce finalized at 9:07 a.m. Arthur texted me a single word, "Colon done dot." I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I made coffee and waited because Winston had taught me something important. Real consequences don't arrive with fireworks. They arrive with silence. At 10:14 a.m., Jamal tried to wire money. The transfer failed at 10:22 a.m. His assistant called 3 banks. No one answered at 10:41 a.m. The first account froze. Arthur called me right on schedule. "It started," he said. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. "Good," I replied. "How bad?" "Worse than he realizes." By noon, Jamal's phone was lighting up like a crime scene. Private banker, business partner, real estate broker, all asking the same question. Why can't we access the funds? Because the trust had been activated. Clause 7B didn't just move control. It locked at any transaction over $50,000, required trustee approval, my approval, and Jamal didn't even know my name was on the paperwork yet. He found out an hour later. Arthur forwarded me the voicemail. Jamal's voice was sharp, fast, unsteady. "Arthur, this is Jamal Winston. There's been some kind of error. My accounts are frozen. Call me back immediately." 5 minutes later, another message. "What kind of sick joke is this?" Then another. "You're fired if this isn't fixed by today." Arthur didn't respond. Neither did I. At 2:03 p.m., Jamal tried to save face. He posted a photo on social media, a luxury watch, a caption about wealth moving in silence. Arthur laughed when he saw it. "He just tried to pawn that watch," he said. "The shop refused it. Ownership verification failed." The silence finally cracked at 3:17 p.m. My phone rang. Jamal. I let it ring. Again and again. Finally, I answered. "Simone," he said, forcing calm. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Oh," I replied. "About what?" "The trust," he said. "Apparently your name is attached." I smiled into the phone. "Attached?" I echoed. "Interesting choice of word. This isn't funny," he snapped. "You need to sign off on the freeze." I stirred my coffee. "Why would I do that?" "Because I'm your ex-husband. You fired me in public," I said softly. "At a funeral." Silence. "You embarrassed me," he said finally. "You cost me credibility." I laughed. "You divorced me for money you don't own." His breath hitched. "I'll make this worth your while," he said quickly. 5 million. 10. Name it. I leaned back. "Do you remember Winston's pearls?" I asked. "What?" "The ones your mother ripped off my neck." Another pause. "I want them back," I continued. "Every single one." "That's not, and I want you to apologize," I added, "publicly, on video." His voice hardened. "You're bluffing." "No," I said calmly. "I'm executing a will." The call ended. An hour later, the fallout spread. Jamal's Miami property deal collapsed. The crypto venture evaporated. The yacht proposal sponsors pulled out. Dominique's social media posts vanished one by one. Mama Estelle called Arthur screaming about humiliation. Arthur didn't answer. By evening, Jamal was officially illiquid, not broke, worse. Trapped. I watched. The skyline darkened outside my window and felt something unexpected. Not joy. Relief. Because, for the first time since the funeral, the power imbalance had flipped. And Jamal finally knew it. But freezing the money was just the opening move, because next, Winston's will was about to go public and take the Winston name down with it, where the truth detonates in front of the world. Jamal thought frozen money was his worst nightmare until the will went public and turned his last name into a liability. The press release went out at exactly 8 a.m. Arthur had warned me. Once this drops, there's no undoing it, he said. Winston designed it that way. I watched the email hit my inbox. Subject: The estate of Winston Harold Winston. Public disclosure 3 minutes later. My phone started vibrating non-stop. News alerts, text messages, unknown numbers. The will wasn't just about money. It was a character assassination wrapped in legal language. Winston hadn't ranted. He hadn't been insulted. He'd documented page after page of dates, receipts, audio transcripts, and sworn affidavits. Evidence of Jamal's failed ventures funded by family bailouts. Evidence of Mama Estelle redirecting trust funds into shell accounts. Evidence of Courtney leaking insider information to friends. And right at the center of it all, Shimon Winston was the only individual who acted in good faith during my final months. She managed my care, protected my interests, and resisted coercion. If my family dissolves their loyalty to her, I dissolve my loyalty to them. That line made every article. By noon, it was trending. Winston Wills Elvis, office tried damage control. They released a statement calling the disclosure misleading and emotionally motivated. Arthur laughed when he read it. Emotionally motivated evidence still holds up in court, he said. At 1:30 p.m., Jamal tried to fight back. He went live. Suitaiforce.com. My father was ill, he said. He was manipulated in his final days. The comments exploded. Then, why didn't you visit him? Receipts don't lie. Free Simone. Dominique stood just off camera. Her smile was frozen. At 2:10 p.m., another document leaked. A clause Winston had kept sealed. Moral conduct provision. If Jamal's public behavior damaged the Winston legacy, his inheritance would convert into a charitable endowment. Jamal ended the livestream mid-sentence. At 3 p.m., donors began withdrawing support. Charities demanded answers. Board seats were suspended. The Winston name, once gold, was now radioactive. Mama Estelle showed up at Arthur's office screaming. Security escorted her out. Courtney deleted her accounts. Dominique stopped wearing the ring at sunset. Jamal called me again. This time, his voice was hollow. You planned this, he said. No, I replied. Winston did. He destroyed us. I looked out at the city. No, I said calmly. He did. I just stopped cleaning up after you. He whispered my name like a plea. I ended the call. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months, because justice wasn't loud, it was thorough. But Winston's final move wasn't about punishment, it was about transfer. And next, I would step into a role no one saw coming, where I stopped surviving and start owning everything. They thought freezing Jamal's money was the indental. They realized I was about to run the entire empire. The boardroom was colder than I expected, not temperature-wise, emotionally. Polished glass table, leather chairs, a skyline view that used to intimidate me back when I sat quietly in the corner taking notes for Jamal. Now, every seat was filled with people waiting for me. Executives, trust officers, legal counsel. At the head of the table sat an empty chair. Arthur stood and cleared his throat. By authority of the Winston Asset Protection Trust, he said, this meeting is now under the control of Trustee Simenon Winston. Every eye shifted. Some are skeptical, some are curious, some are afraid. I took my seat. No dramatic speech, no victory lap. Let's begin, I said. The first agenda item hit like a hammer. Jamal's authority revoked, not suspended, not reviewed, revoked. His voting rights across 4 subsidiaries were transferred to the trust. Tumier, man in a gray suit, raised his hand. What about public perception? Yes, Jamal is still the face of not anymore. I cut in, effective immediately. All Brennan using his images. Paused. Silence. Someone else spoke. The markets will panic. I shook my head. They already did. We stabilize by acting, not pretending. Arthur watched me closely. Winston had trained me quietly during his last months. How to read contracts, how to spot financial rot, how to tell loyalty from fear. This wasn't new, it was overdue. We moved fast. I authorized audits Jamal had blocked for years, terminated partnerships built on smoke and mirrors, but covered assets he'd quietly pledged as collateral. By noon, the numbers told a brutal story. The empire wasn't thriving, it was bleeding, and Jamal had been wounded. Then came the final item. Arthur slid a single document toward me. Winston's last instruction, he said. Optional but recommended. I opened it. Appointment of interim CEO. My name was already typed. The room held its breath. I signed. No applause. No resistance. Just acceptance. Because power doesn't announce itself. It settles. An hour later, Jamal stormed into the building. Security stopped him at the elevator. I watched the footage from my phone. He shouted, threatened, demanded, then begged. The guards didn't move. Arthur texted me. He wants to see you. I thought about it, then replied. 5 minutes. Jamal walked into the boardroom looking smaller than I remembered. No suit jacket. Tie loosened. Eyes red. You stole my life, he said. I met his gaze. You gambled it. This was supposed to be mine. You inherited the opportunity. I said. You burned it. He laughed bitterly. So what now? You run things. For now, I replied. He leaned forward. And me. I stood. You're free, I said. Just like you wanted. He stared, confused. No money to control, I continued. No image to hide behind. No one left to blame. Security escorted him out. I didn't watch it this time, because my story wasn't about him anymore. But Winston's legacy wasn't just about taking power, it was about what I did with it. And my final decision would shock everyone who thought this was a revenge story. Everyone thought I'd keep the empire until I gave it away and changed the rules forever. The headlines were already written in people's heads. Wronged wife seizes billionaire empire, cold revenge dressed up as justice, power changes hands. They were waiting for me to become the villain. That's why what I did next broke every expectation. I didn't fire everyone. I didn't sell the companies. I didn't turn Jamal's downfall into my victory parade. I called a press conference. Not in a ballroom. Not at headquarters. At the hospice center where Winston had spent his final months. The same place no one from his family bothered to visit. Cameras clicked as I stepped up to the podium. No diamonds. No power suit. Just a navy blazer and a calm voice. Winston was not a perfect man, I began. But he believed in responsibility. In stewardship. In consequence. Reporters leaned in. I didn't inherit his wealth, I continued. I inherited his instructions. Murmurs spread. I announced it clearly. The Winston Trust would be dismantled slowly, deliberately, and converted into 3 entities. A medical endowment, funding, end-of-life care for families who can't afford, EDA, Business Accountability Fund, auditing legacy corporations for ethical violations, a scholarship pipeline for women managing family businesses without power or protection desks. This wasn't expected. I looked directly into the cameras. This is not revenge, I said. Closer? That afternoon, I signed my final order as trustee. Jamal's remaining inheritance. Redirected. Not to me. Not to the state. To the endowment. Arta watched quietly. You're sure? He asked. Yes, I replied. Because power kept for ego becomes poison. Jamal tried to call that night. I didn't answer. I didn't need. 2 months later, I walked past a cafe. A headline blinked on a screen inside. Former heir files for bankruptcy declines. Commenti kept walking. My phone buzzed. A message from a scholarship recipient. Because of you, I didn't have to choose between family and dignity. Smile. Winston had been right. The real inheritance wasn't money. It was control over what mattered. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. They thought this story was about revenge, but the real twist was choosing something bigger. Then, Paul, if you stay till the end, comment will be Custer. Truth always finds a way.